Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the most elaborately policed, quietly surveilled, and aggressively documented romantic landscapes in American history. Who you could love in 1950s America, who you absolutely couldn't, and the full legal, religious, and social apparatus that made sure you knew the difference. Not the sock hop version, not the poodle skirt and the charming quarterback and the soda fountain happily ever after. We're after the actual one with a sheriff and a flashlight and a notebook of names and a judge explaining that God himself had drawn the seating chart. If that sounds like your kind of bedtime story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if a quietly devastating, deeply specific historical chaos is the sort of thing that helps you fall asleep. Big thanks to the one of you who suggested this, hoping you're cozy under the blanket, hoping the porch light at your place is off, and hoping nobody in your household has been recently logged in a police notebook. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it's reading on your clock. It's apparently always around 3 a.m., somewhere on this map, which is, honestly, exactly when this material lands hardest. Dim the lights, get a fan going for a little soft hush, settle in, draw the blanket over, and maybe tuck your hands somewhere the Oak Park Sheriff's Department can't see them. Have you ever wondered what it actually cost financially, socially, spiritually, and in potential prison years to take someone out for a Coke in 1953? Why 30 states had an opinion about who you could legally sleep next to, written into criminal code, enforceable at 2 a.m. with flashlights? What happened when a church, a corporation, a landlord, a judge, and a police officer with a small notebook all agreed it was their business who you were seeing? Could you survive a social universe where the wrong perfume, the wrong jacket, the wrong last name, or the wrong person standing next to you in the wrong county was technically a felony? Did the crinolines know? Did the cherry coke know? What was the exact moment a letter jacket stopped being outerwear and became a legally binding social contract? And seriously, who was writing all those names down, and where did the notebook go? Congratulations. You've just woken up in America, 1955. The doorbell rings at 7 sharp. Someone's standing on your porch with their hair combed flat with Vitalis, smelling faintly of petroleum and optimism. The whole country is watching. Good luck. You are standing on a concrete porch in a quiet American suburb in 1955, holding a small bouquet you bought from a corner florist on the way over. The porch light is already on. It has been on since 6:45 because her father wants it understood that he saw your headlights. You ring the doorbell at 7 sharp, because 7:01 would be a problem and 6:59 would be worse. The door opens. Her father is already in the doorway, in a cardigan, holding a half-finished cup of coffee. He doesn't shake your hand yet. That comes later, if things go well, which is not guaranteed. He looks at the bouquet. He looks at your hair, which is sticky with Vitalis and smells faintly like a mechanic's waiting room. He looks at your shoes. The shoes are important. He registers all of this in approximately 4 seconds without changing his expression. You are being processed. The cardigan is brown, ribbed, and quietly thorough. The cardigan is doing most of the talking. Let's talk about what tonight is going to cost you. The movie is $1.25. The soda fountain afterward, 2 cherry cokes, 1 hot fudge sundae to split runs another $1 and change. A 10-cent tip, because you're not an animal. Total damage. Somewhere between $2.50 and $4 against a weekly allowance of $2.80. You have been financially planning this date the way a small government plans a war. The math does not fully work. It never fully works. She appears at the top of the stairs in a dress with a crinoline underneath that has been dipped in sugar water to hold its shape. The skirt stands out from her hips like it has somewhere to be. It smells faintly sweet and starchy, the way a bakery does before anything is actually baked. She descends slowly, because descending fast in that much crinoline is not physically possible without structural incident. Her mother is watching from the kitchen doorway. Her father is still holding the coffee. Everyone in this house is watching everyone else in this house. Sandra's father takes a small sip of his coffee, looks at you over the rim, and asks where you go to school. He already knows where you go to school. He has known since Tuesday. The question is the thing. It's basically LinkedIn, except your professional title is determined by the cafeteria and the interviewer is holding the coffee. You answer. He nods once, the way a man nods when he's filing your answer somewhere. You have approximately 90 seconds in this doorway before her father decides whether you are the kind of young man who returns his daughter by 10 o'clock or the kind who requires a conversation. A Calfa-style attendant, this man is not. He's standing in his own house, in his own cardigan, with his own coffee, and the coffee cup is positioned at chest height in a way that communicates something you don't entirely have words for. A shield. A gavel. A prop in a performance where he is both the audience and the judge. Her name is Sandra. She reaches the bottom of the stairs, smooths the front of her dress with both palms, and smiles at you the way people smile when several other people are watching them smile. You smile back. The bouquet is transferred. Her mother produces a vase from somewhere with a speed that suggests she had it ready. Her father sets down the coffee cup. Now the handshake happens. It is firm. It has a duration. It means something specific, and everyone in the room knows what it means and nobody says it out loud. You are out the door by 7:12. The porch light stays on behind you. It will stay on until 10. Before you rang that doorbell, you sat at your bedroom desk with a small ledger and counted the money. Your allowance is $2.80 a week, which a 17 magazine survey will soon publish as the national average for teenage boys in 1953. The date you are about to take her on will cost between $2.50 and $4, depending on what she orders at the soda fountain. You do this math twice. The numbers do not get better. They never do. The movie is the fixed cost. Admission runs about 50 cents each, so $1 gone before you've even found seats. Then there's the soda fountain afterward, because there is always a soda fountain afterward. That part isn't optional, it's structural. A cherry Coke at the Walgreens counter is 10 cents. A hot fudge sundae is something like 35 cents. The air in there smells of vanilla extract and phosphate soda and something faintly burnt from the back where the grill lives. You will sit on a spinning stool that wobbles slightly and you will order confidently, because confidence is also part of the cost, and it doesn't appear on the receipt. Sociologist Robert Herman will publish a study in 1954, noting that college men spend $10 to $15 a month on dating, roughly 15% of a typical student's total budget. 15%. That's the percentage of your income you'd spend on a serious car payment. The 1950s date is, financially speaking, a car payment you make to sit next to someone on a spinning stool while she decides between the sundae and the banana split. She will order the sundae. The banana split costs more and she knows you know that. A boy named Gary Lindstrom, 17, working weekends at a hardware store on Route 9, keeps a small notebook in his jacket pocket. The notebook is small, brown, and faintly grease-marked from the register. Not for names, not for phone numbers. For prices. He has written down, in pencil, the cost of a movie ticket, a cherry Coke, a hot fudge sundae, a bus transfer if the car isn't available, and 2 sticks of Beeman's gum. He adds them up on slow afternoons behind the register. He crosses things out. He adds them up again. The gum is non-negotiable. You cannot show up to a date without the gum. Now Evelyn Duval's 1,950 book, Facts of Life and Love for Teenagers, lays out a hierarchy of physical intimacy that runs from hand-holding at the respectable end to going all the way at the catastrophic one, with specific social consequences attached to each rung. The book sells briskly. It is read by mothers who leave it on the kitchen table at a meaningful angle, and by daughters who read it in their rooms with the door closed and their own conclusions. The gap between what the book describes and what is actually happening is considerable. Kinsey's 1953 report finds that 50% of married American women have had premarital sexual experience. A 1953 Ladies' Home Journal poll finds that 86% of American women believe a girl who has premarital sex has damaged her chances of a happy marriage. Both of these things are true at the same time. Nobody mentions this out loud. The soda fountain keeps spinning. The sundaes keep arriving. Gary adds up his notebook again, reconsiders the hot fudge, and decides to keep it on the list. You fold your small ledger. You put on the jacket. You check the hair Vitalis, flat, faintly medicinal, the way hair is supposed to smell in 1953 when you are trying to make an impression. The doorbell is 30 seconds away. The math has been done. The math was always going to come out this way. You walk into Walgreens at 7:40 after the movie, and the smell hits you immediately: vanilla extract from the hot fudge warmer, the faintly chemical sweetness of phosphate soda, and a low underlying hum of cigarette smoke from the men eating BLTs alone at the counter. You sit on a swiveling stool with a red vinyl cushion that has a small split exposing the foam. She sits on the next stool. 2 cherry Cokes cost 20 cents. You order them, she lets you. The soda jerk, a man named Darrell who has been here since 3 o'clock and whose white paper hat has given up trying to stay level, slides the glasses toward you without looking. Each one has a long spoon in it that will not be used. The Coke is cold enough to make the glass sweat immediately, and the cherry syrup sits at the bottom in a dark red cloud before it dissolves. It's 10 cents each. 10 cents is nothing. 10 cents is also, depending on how the week has gone, a significant portion of what's left. Nobody at the counter is watching you. Everybody at the counter is watching you. This is a distinction the 1950s Walgreens has refined to a precise social art, the looking without looking, the peripheral awareness of who is sitting next to whom and what that means. The woman 2 stools down adjusts her coat. The man at the register folds his receipt. Darrell wipes the counter in a slow oval that doesn't go anywhere near anything that needs wiping. Let's talk about what she's wearing. Her crinoline skirt has been dipped in sugar water to hold its shape. This is a standard technique, done the night before, left to dry overnight, producing a skirt that stands out at a precise angle, as if it has made a structural commitment. Up close, the fabric smells faintly sweet and starchy, the way a baking tin smells before anything is actually in it. The skirt takes up about 1/3 of the available space between the 2 stools. It has opinions about personal space. It is enforcing them. Your hair is combed back with Vitalis flat, shiny, and faintly medicinal, somewhere between a barbershop and a hospital corridor, as if someone developed a pomade specifically for people who wanted their hair to say I am well groomed and also slightly industrial. You applied it carefully. It is doing its job. You are doing yours, which is sitting next to her on a stool with a split cushion and ordering a 10-cent Coke and not saying anything that damages the evening. This is where the Evelyn Duval hierarchy comes back in. Except Evelyn Duval didn't write a chapter about soda fountains specifically, which feels like an oversight, because this is where a significant portion of the hierarchy is being negotiated in real time. You are somewhere between the hand-holding rung and the next one. Exactly where is a matter of interpretation. The interpretation depends on who drives home, how long the car is parked before the engine starts, and whether Darrell notices. Of course, Darrell has seen this particular negotiation approximately 400 times. He wipes the counter again. The oval goes nowhere new. The cherry Cokes take about 12 minutes to finish if you're not in a hurry, 8 if the silence becomes load-bearing. You are not in a hurry. Outside, the street is visible through the plate glass window. A 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air is parked across the road, its chrome catching the drugstore light, its interior smelling of vinyl and someone's older brother's cigarettes. The car is the next location in the evening's unofficial itinerary. Everyone in the Walgreens knows this. Nobody says it. The Cokes are very good. By 1958, there are roughly 4,000 drive-in movie theaters operating across the United States, and every adult, teenager, police officer, and minister in America has reached a quiet, mutual understanding about what the back rows are for. You pay 75 cents per car at the entrance booth. You hang the small metal speaker on your driver's side window. The film begins. Within 12 minutes, fewer than half the cars in the lot are facing the screen. The other half are facing each other. No one comments on this. The speaker itself is a small, tinny rectangle that clips onto the window glass and delivers the film's audio in a frequency range best described as aggressively insufficient. Dialogue arrives muffled. The score comes through as something between a hum and an accusation. Insects ping the windshield with the persistence of small, committed critics. None of this matters. The film is not the point. The film is a structural alibi. It exists so that 4,000 parking lots full of teenagers can tell their parents they went to the movies, which is technically true. Let's talk about the car. It's a 1955 Bel Air. Vinyl seats the colour of cream, warm from the afternoon sun and faintly sticky against the backs of your thighs through your crinoline. There's the permanent suggestion of cigarette smoke in the upholstery. Underneath that, a trace of Chanel. No. 5 from the previous occupant, or possibly Evening in Paris, which came in a cobalt blue bottle and cost under $1, and smelled like someone had distilled the concept of romance into a liquid that was perhaps 40% floral and 60% ambition. The car is the most private space most teenagers have access to in 1958. The car is doing a lot of work. This is where the Oak Park, Illinois Police Department enters the picture with a notebook. Beginning in 1952, officers patrol known parking areas on Friday and Saturday nights, moving slowly through the dark in their cruisers, angling a flashlight across windshields and writing down names. Not arresting anyone, just writing. Officer Dennis Moriarty tilts the beam through the glass, notes the fogged windows, uncaps his pen, and records 2 names with the flat efficiency of a man completing a form. The names go in the book. Sometimes the book calls your parents. Your parents were not expecting the book to call them. The book doesn't care. Across the country, the drive-in manager named Mr. Earl Petrowski walks the back rows of his lot in Skokie with a flashlight every Friday at 10:15 sharp. He doesn't shine it directly. He angles it across the gravel and lets the beam communicate. Some churches post the times and locations of local drive-ins in their bulletins, not as recommendations. Cardinal Spellman of New York has opinions about going steady, and the opinions extend, naturally, to parked cars. What the back row offers, practically speaking, is approximately 45 minutes of unobserved time, which, in the social architecture of 1955, is roughly equivalent to having a room with a door that locks. You don't have that room. Your house has parents in it, arranged strategically. Your neighborhood has Mrs. Peterson at number 414, arranged behind a sheer curtain with a phone within reach. The car is the gap in the system. Mr. Petrowski's flashlight tilts across the gravel one more time and finds your bumper. The crinoline, for what it's worth, is not helping anyone move freely. It's been dipped in sugar water to hold its bell shape, which means it crinkles when compressed and smells faintly of something between a bakery and a starch factory. It occupies roughly the lateral space of a small dining table. The Bel Air's front bench seat is wide, but not that wide. The whole arrangement requires a kind of spatial negotiation that is essentially furniture rearrangement, performed in the dark, to a muffled soundtrack, while insects evaluate your choices from the windshield. It is, in its way, a very American form of romance. It is a Friday night in 1,953 inches, Oak Park, Illinois, and you are parked at a known overlook on a residential road with a girl whose family attends your church. The trees are doing their job. The radio is low. Then headlights sweep across the back of the car, and a small flashlight beam moves slowly along the window. The officer asks for your name. He asks for hers. He writes both names down in a small notebook he carries in the breast pocket of his uniform. He doesn't charge you with anything. He doesn't need to. Officer Wendell, or someone exactly like Officer Wendell, just writes the names down in careful block letters, caps the pen, and wishes you a good evening in a tone that does not wish you a good evening. He gets back in the patrol car. The headlights swing away. You sit in the dark with the radio and the insects and the knowledge that somewhere in the Oak Park Police Department, your name is now in a small book next to hers. The notebook does its work on Saturday morning. Your mother picks up the kitchen phone at 9 to 10 with a dish towel still in her left hand. A polite official voice on the line tells her what was written down and where. The call lasts about 4 minutes. Your mother says very little during those 4 minutes. She sets the dish towel on the counter, folded once. The silence she produces afterward is considerably louder than the call. The notebook itself is small, black, and reliably affronted. Officer Wendell carries it in the breast pocket of a uniform that has been pressed by his wife, Eleanor, who has views about the kind of teenagers parked at overlooks but keeps them filed in the same drawer she keeps the iron. Wendell's pen scratches 3 lines and goes back in its loop. The breast pocket buttons. The system is back in its uniform. The girl in the passenger seat has her own version of this situation, and it's worse. Your name in the notebook is an inconvenience. Her name in the notebook is a data point that follows her. Evelyn Duval's 1,950 book, the one they hand out in health class, like a warranty card nobody asked for, has a whole chapter on reputation as a permanent ledger. You can accumulate withdrawals, the book implies, and the bank does not forgive them. The notebook is just the branch office, and the notebook has opinions about certain names more than others. An Anglo kid and a Mexican-American girl from the same Oak Park street aren't breaking a written ordinance either, but Officer Wendell's pen moves a little more deliberately. The notebook pauses. The call on Saturday morning has a different quality to it, less polite, more pointed, as if the violation being reported is somehow self-evident in a way that doesn't need to be named. Nobody names it. It gets written down anyway. Meanwhile, inside the houses on the residential roads where the overlooks are located, parents are having entirely different conversations about exactly this. Mrs. Patricia Holmberg, 3 blocks over, has already told her daughter that there are boys you date and boys you don't, and the distinction should be obvious if she'd been paying attention. The distinction is not written down. It doesn't need to be. Hairy. It runs on the same fuel as the Notebook, the assumption that everybody already knows the rules and that not knowing them is itself a kind of confession. You drive home with both hands on the wheel. The radio stays off. The trees outside do not offer an opinion on any of this, which is more than can be said for everyone else. You have read the book. Everyone has read the book. Evelyn Duval published Facts of Life and Love for Teenagers in 1950, and by 1955 it sits on the bedside table of every aunt, mother, school counselor, and Sunday school librarian in middle-class America. The book lays out a numbered ladder of physical intimacy that begins at hand-holding and proceeds upward, rung by rung, towards something the book refers to only as going all the way. Each rung has a warning attached. The warnings are not, on close reading, warnings to boys. The ladder is basically a Duolingo skill tree, except every level you unlock damages your reputation, and there's no way to go back to the previous screen. Hand-holding is fine, a goodnight handshake is fine, a goodnight kiss, properly administered at the door with the porch light on and your father audible somewhere inside, is also fine. The moment the porch light goes off, the book's tone shifts. Something about the absence of that light concerns Evelyn Duval enormously. Let's talk about the warnings. They run approximately like this. Step too far, too fast, and you signal to a boy that you don't respect yourself. And a boy who sees that signal will not respect you either. And a boy who doesn't respect you will tell other boys, and those other boys have sisters, and the sisters go to your school. That is the whole system. It fits on an index card. The card is not addressed to the boy. A 1,953 Ladies' Home Journal poll found that 86% of American women surveyed believed a girl who had premarital sex had significantly damaged her chances of a happy marriage. This is the stated norm. Kinsey's 1,953 report, published the same year, found that 50% of married American women had had premarital sexual experience. These two facts lived in the same decade without ever being introduced to each other. Missus. Patricia Hollenbeck, school librarian. Sensible shoes. The kind of woman who stamps your book with more force than is technically necessary places a copy of Duval on the return shelf every September. Spine out. Title visible. She doesn't recommend it. She doesn't need to. It's just there, the way a thermometer is just there. You already know what it measures. The Catholic Church has its own position on the matter, and the position is, the matter should not arise because you should not be going steady before 18. Reverend Walter Imbiorsky committed this opinion to a 1,956 pamphlet called The New Approach to Dating. The pamphlet sold over 1 million copies. Cardinal Francis Spellman of New York issued pastoral letters explaining that going steady led inevitably to occasions of sin. Cardinal Spellman does not define what an occasion of sin looks like, exactly, but the crinolines dipped in sugar water to hold their shape probably aren't helping. Those crinolines smell faintly sweet and faintly starchy and rustle when you sit down, which is its own kind of announcement. Patty Norquist and 3 other senior girls cluster at locker 217 on Monday at 7:55. Patty has heard a thing about Linda Mercer's Friday night. She doesn't say the thing out loud. She just adjusts the strap of her saddle shoe, mentions Linda's name in the middle of a different sentence, and watches the other 3 girls' faces register the file update. The faces are flat and careful. No officer required, no parent called. The boy from Linda's Friday night is, meanwhile, getting a small congratulatory nod from a teammate by the water fountain. The book keeps selling. Not because it answers the right questions, but because it names the rungs out loud. And in 1955, naming the rungs out loud is already a minor act of honesty. You read it with a flashlight under the covers, the sugar-stiffened crinoline hanging on the chair, the cobalt blue bottle of Evening in Paris still faintly scenting the air. The warnings blur. The ladder stays. On a Tuesday in October, in a hallway between 5th and 6th period, a boy named David takes off his letter jacket, heavy wool, 2 leather sleeves, a chenille V stitched over the heart and hands it to a girl named Linda, who puts it on without a word. By Wednesday morning, every student in the school knows. By Wednesday afternoon, 3 teachers know. By Friday, Linda's mother knows. No announcement has been made. The jacket itself has done all of the speaking that is required by the system. The jacket is not a jacket. It's a press release. It communicates David's sport, his year, his school, and now his intentions, all without requiring David to say anything that could later be denied. Linda, swimming in wool that smells like Vitalis and gymnasium floor wax, is now wearing a public declaration of availability removed. Other boys register this immediately. They don't need to be told. The jacket tells them the same thing it told the teachers and Linda's mother. This one's taken. Let's talk about the token economy, because it has levels. The school ring comes first worn on a chain around the neck, or wrapped in Angora yarn so it fits a smaller finger, which is a modification that takes about 20 minutes and communicates everything about how serious this is. Then comes the charm bracelet, if David is the charm bracelet type. Then the jacket, which is the loudest of the three because it's visible from across a parking lot, and it weighs approximately as much as a small child. Each object functions as a public announcement to the entire student body simultaneously. The hallway witnesses are involuntary and many. Every girl at the next locker, every boy at the water fountain, Mrs. Holmgren, the homeroom teacher who notices in the first 30 seconds and has the file updated by lunch. Nothing has been said. Nothing needs to be. Now, the jacket has a return policy, and the return policy is social catastrophe. If Linda gives it back, that transaction is also public, also instantaneous, and considerably less pleasant than the first one. The jacket coming off Linda's shoulders means something happened. The school will form a theory. The theory will be wrong in the details and correct in the general shape. It will circulate by Thursday. Linda's mother will hear a version of it by Saturday, possibly from a neighbor who wasn't there and doesn't know David. Meanwhile, David's investment in this system is not only emotional. A 1,955 date movie plus soda fountain runs him somewhere between $2.50 and $4 against a weekly allowance of $2.80. The average teenage boy in 1953 is budgeting roughly 15% of his total available money on dating, which means a bad stretch of Fridays can genuinely affect whether he eats lunch. A cherry Coke at the Walgreens counter costs 10 cents. He can afford those. The movie is the variable that gets him. The soda fountain part of the evening has its own choreography. You sit at the counter, not a booth. Booths are for couples who've been going steady long enough to stop performing. At the counter, Barbara Litt, who's worked the Sunday and Tuesday shifts since 1951 and has seen approximately everything, slides 2 glasses down without being asked and doesn't look at either of you. The glass is cold. The air smells like vanilla extract, hot fudge and phosphate soda. It smells exactly like 1,955 is supposed to smell, because it is 1,955, and this is what it smells like. The crinolines hold their shape because they've been dipped in sugar water and left to dry, which means Linda's skirt is faintly starchy and faintly sweet and rustles with a specific authority when she slides onto the counter stool. The crinoline has opinions about how much space it requires. It requires a lot of space. It is not asking. The jacket on Linda's shoulders is heavy, loud, and weather-resistant, a wool announcement she did not get to write. Linda wearing the jacket signals commitment. Commitment signals that the physical hierarchy from Duval's ladder, the one everyone has read and nobody cites aloud, has paused at a particular rung, possibly for a while. The jacket is a promise. What it's promising is somewhat vague and very understood. David knows, Linda knows, Barbara Litt at the Walgreens counter absolutely knows. She's seen the jacket on 6 different girls in 3 years. She doesn't say anything. She refreshes the Coke without being asked. You are kneeling in a wooden pew at St. Bartholomew's on a Sunday morning in 1954, and the parish priest is reading aloud from a pastoral letter that Cardinal Francis Spellman of the Archdiocese of New York has issued to be delivered from every pulpit in the diocese. The letter is about the practice of going steady, which the cardinal opposes. The priest reads slowly. The cardinal believes that going steady leads inevitably to what the letter calls occasions of sin. The phrase is read in the same neutral tone as the parking lot announcement that follows. The woman in the pew ahead of you adjusts her white gloves without turning around. The man beside her stares at a fixed point somewhere near the altar. Nobody looks at the teenagers in the back row. The teenagers in the back row are wearing each other's rings. Cardinal Spellman is not alone in this. Reverend Walter Imbiorsky published a pamphlet in 1956 called The New Approach to Dating, which told teenagers they should not go steady before the age of 18 under any circumstances. It sold over 1 million copies. 1 million copies, in pamphlet form, about teenager dating protocol. The pamphlet has opinions, strong ones, confidently distributed ones, Mrs. Benedetti runs the CYO from a card table in the vestibule and wears the same brooch every week, small, gold, and quietly imperious. She hands you a folded bulletin on your way out without making eye contact, which she only does when she has views. The bulletin lists upcoming youth group activities. Chaperoned, plural. The chaperones are not optional. The church does not want you not to date. Dating is fine. Healthy, even. It wants you to date widely, casually, and non-committally, which is the church's preferred condition for a 16-year-old, on the theory that going steady produces proximity, and proximity produces occasions, and occasions, eventually, produce a folded note, Mrs. Benedetti will hear about by Tuesday. The Catholic Church also has paperwork for you if you do manage to survive to marriage age with your soul intact. If your intended is not Catholic, a document called the anti-nuptial declaration must be signed before the wedding can proceed, in ink. Your non-Catholic fiancé agrees in writing to raise your children Catholic. The document doesn't ask how he feels about this. There isn't a second page. The same thing happens about half a mile away, in a different congregation. The 1957 Marshall-Sclair study found that 90% of American Jewish parents preferred their children marry within the faith. The Catholic Church required the declaration, Mrs. Greenbaum across town, whose daughter is seeing a boy from Lutheran services, sets out her good tablecloth on Friday night and mentions her friend Marilyn's son 3 times before the soup arrives. The tablecloth is white and pressed. Of course, none of this stops anything. Kinsey's 1953 report found 50% of married American women had premarital sexual experience. The pastoral letter doesn't mention Kinsey. The Kinsey report doesn't mention the pastoral letter. Both exist simultaneously in 1954, and the gap between them is where most of the decade is quietly living. You walk out of St. Bartholomew's into November air, bulletin in hand. The ring on your finger is technically a friendship ring. Everyone understands it isn't. The Cardinal's letter has been delivered. The parking lot announcement was about the youth group bake sale. The bake sale is next Saturday. Attendance, the bulletin suggests, would be appreciated. It is the spring formal at St. Mary's High School in 1956, and a woman named Mrs. Donnelly has been assigned to sit in a folding metal chair against the wall of the gymnasium for the duration of the dance. She is a parishioner. She has been doing this for 9 years. Her chair is positioned so she can see the punch table, the doorway, the bandstand, and roughly 2/3 of the dance floor. The chaperone rules require 6 inches of daylight between any 2 dancers. She measures with her eyes. The gymnasium smells like floor wax, hairspray, and the faint vanilla petroleum collision of evening in Paris perfume meeting Vitalis hair tonic from 12 feet away. The girls are in crinolines dipped in sugar water, which is why every skirt holds its shape like a small, ambitious architecture project. Up close, in a warm room, those skirts smell faintly of bakery. The boys have hair that doesn't move. Nothing about the hair moves. The hair has made a decision. The 6-inch rule is the law of the gymnasium, enforced by Mrs. Donnelly's folding chair, her 23 years of Catholic parish membership, and her willingness to stand up and walk across a dance floor in front of everyone. She has done this 11 times tonight. She has a system. She spots the infraction, waits 1 beat not 2, and walks. The walk itself is watchful, hungry, and reliably affronted. No one wants Mrs. Donnelly's walk directed at them. A standard 1,956 date dance admission, corsage, cherry coke at the soda fountain afterward, costs a teenage boy somewhere between $3 and $5, against an average weekly allowance of $2.80. He has been saving. The corsage alone is $1.50. He is not here for the film. There is no film. He is here for 90 minutes of supervised proximity to a girl in a sugar-stiffened skirt, measured at 6 inches minimum by Mrs. Donnelly. The girls have their own accounting. Evelyn Duval's 1,950 book, Facts of Life and Love for Teenagers, maps the territory in careful steps, hand-holding, then the arm around the shoulder, then the goodnight kiss, each rung carrying its own social weather forecast. A 1,953 Ladies' Home Journal poll found that 86% of American women believed a girl who moved too far down that list had seriously damaged her chances of a happy marriage. The book doesn't say damaged. The book says something gentler. The meaning is the same. Mrs. Donnelly doesn't read sociology. She doesn't need to. She watches Tommy Reinholdt steer Patricia Marsh toward the corner near the fire exit, and she is already rising from the folding chair before Tommy has finished the maneuver. Patricia sees her coming. Patricia says something to Tommy. Tommy straightens up. The 6 inches return. Mrs. Donnelly pivots back to her chair without breaking stride, like a heat-seeking system that has resolved its target and powered down. She sits. She smooths her skirt. The punch bowl continues to exist. Of course the punch bowl is innocent. Someone has guarded it anyway. There's a junior class boy named Gerald stationed near it for reasons no one has explained to Gerald. He's been there for 40 minutes. He's watched 6 people pour punch. He doesn't know what he's preventing. He is preventing the idea of something, and the idea, in 1956, is sometimes enough. On a coffee table in your parents' living room, there is a thick navy blue book called Etiquette by Emily Post, and somewhere around page 470, it addresses the question that you are presently confronting at the Walgreens counter. Should a girl offer to pay her share? Emily Post says no. She also says a girl should never allow herself to feel financially obligated. The book is held in the hands of a generation of mothers who have memorized the relevant pages. The mothers are very clear on the rule. The rule does not mention that a standard 1,955 date movie, then soda fountain costs your date between $2.50 and $4. His weekly allowance is $2.80. The math is doing something uncomfortable, and nobody in the etiquette book addresses the math. He's already calculated it twice on the bus. You can tell because he ordered a small Coke. The Walgreens counter is not a counter. It's a negotiation. The air smells like vanilla extract and hot fudge and something faintly phosphate sharp that doesn't have a name but that you will associate with Saturday afternoons for the rest of your life. A cherry Coke cost 10 cents. You know it cost 10 cents. He knows you know. The stools spin slightly if you shift your weight, which is something to do while the silence makes its point. The boy sitting next to you, his name is Gary, and Gary has applied Vitalis to his hair with the focused intensity of someone diffusing something is performing a very specific kind of ease. Gary reaches for his wallet at the exact moment that suggests he had always planned to reach for his wallet, that reaching for the wallet is the most natural gesture in the world, that no part of him has been calculating since Thursday. The wallet hesitates slightly. Gary does not acknowledge the wallet. The whole arrangement runs on a tier system that everyone at the counter is silently maintaining. The cafeteria seating chart from third period is the master document. The stools at the Walgreens counter are the courtroom where it gets enforced. You date within or above your tier. You do not date below. Darryl behind the counter has watched 4 years of these arrangements. He doesn't comment, but his rag stops on the laminate for half a beat when the pairing doesn't make sense. Of course, the market also has a gender clause. The boy pays because the boy paying is what proves he is serious, which proves you are worth being serious about, which proves the date is happening in the correct moral direction. Emily Post does not say any of this out loud. She doesn't have to. Gary's wallet, sweat warm and significantly lighter than it was at 5 o'clock, makes the case on her behalf. Now, what you do with your hands while he pays is also governed. You don't reach for your purse that implies he can't cover it. You don't thank him too enthusiastically that implies you're surprised, which implies you had doubts. You smile in a way that acknowledges without acknowledging. It's a very specific smile. Your mother has it. Her mother had it. It is passed down like silverware. Darlene, 2 stools down, is on a date with someone whose allowance is not the constraint here, and you can tell because she got the banana split. Darlene's date has a car. The car changes the math entirely, in ways the Emily Post book does not cover but that everyone at the counter understands. The car matters because the car is private. The car is the only private space available to 2 people under 20 in 1955 who are not yet married and do not share a home. The soda fountain has stools that spin. The car has a back seat. These are different propositions, and the back seat is where Evelyn Duval's hierarchy begins to feel less like a chapter heading and more like a live question. Gary leaves the tip. He leaves 15 cents, which is generous relative to the check and catastrophic relative to Thursday. He does not look at the 15 cents after he puts it down. The Vitalis holds. There is a ledger that is not written down anywhere but is, nonetheless, exact. It is the ledger of who has done what with whom in your high school, and it is kept collectively in the heads of approximately 450 teenagers, 6 homeroom teachers, 2 guidance counselors, and the school secretary. If you are a boy and your name appears in the ledger, you gain social position. If you are a girl and your name appears in the ledger, you lose it. You have no appeal. There is also no version of the ledger you can use to dock a boy. Evelyn Duval published a book in 1950 called Facts of Life and Love for Teenagers, which laid out a hierarchy of physical intimacy as a numbered list. Hand-holding, then a goodnight kiss, then, several rungs further up, kissing with your arms around each other, at which point the tone of the text becomes noticeably more cautious. Each step on the list carries its own annotation about what other people will say about you afterward. The footnotes are not subtle. You keep the book under your mattress. Your mother put it there on purpose. A 1,953 Ladies' Home Journal poll found that 86% of American women surveyed believed a girl who had premarital sex had significantly damaged her chances of a happy marriage. That same year, Kinsey's report found that 50% of married American women had already had premarital sex. Both of these things are simultaneously true while you are trying to button your cardigan in front of the bathroom mirror. The country has decided to discuss only one of them. The ledger tracks the angle of your goodnight at the front door. It tracks whether the porch light came on. It tracks how long the car sat in your driveway and whether any neighbors were still up. Sandra Kowalski, who lives 3 houses down and keeps her curtains precisely open enough to see the street, has contributed materially to the ledger without ever writing anything down. She has simply remembered, and mentioned, and remembered again. Her curtains are sheer and ivory. The Going Steady system ran parallel to all of this and had its own material grammar. A school ring passed wordlessly across a homeroom desk was a public filing. A letter jacket draped over a girl's shoulders was a press release. A charm bracelet transferred from one wrist to another meant the previous press release had been retracted. None of this required words because the objects were already doing the talking, loudly, in a room full of people who had nowhere else to be at 8:15 inches the morning. The Catholic Church had thoughts about going steady. Cardinal Francis Spellman issued pastoral letters during the 1950s warning that going steady led inevitably to occasions of sin. Reverend Walter Imbiorski's 1956 pamphlet, The New Approach to Dating, told teenagers specifically not to go steady before age 18 and sold over 1 million copies. 1 million copies. Someone was buying them. Presumably not the teenagers. The ledger doesn't care about Kinsey. Half the married women in the country have first-hand evidence that the stated rules and the actual outcomes aren't running on the same track, and the ledger has filed exactly none of that information. The ledger cares about Sandra's curtains and the porch light and what Tommy Ferraro said to 3 people at lunch on Thursday. Tommy is a very committed, unpaid bureaucrat. He has never been thanked for the work, and he is not stopping. You navigate all of this in a crinoline that has been dipped in sugar water to hold its shape, which means it smells faintly of something between a bakery and a starch factory and crackles softly when you sit down. The dress has opinions about posture. The ledger has opinions about everything else. Both of them are watching you. In 1953, a 750-page hardcover book called Sexual Behavior in the Human Female is published by W.B. Saunders Company of Philadelphia, and it contains the finding that 50% of married American women have had premarital sex. The book is reviewed in newspapers. The book sells 185,000 copies in the first 10 days. Every adult in your town has heard of the number. Almost none of them mention it. The number floats above the dinner table and the church social and the PTA meeting, unspoken, like a smell no one will agree exists. The gap sits, large, flat, and impolitely measurable, between 2 facts. On one side, the 1,953 Ladies' Home Journal poll, in which 86% of American women say a girl who has premarital sex has seriously damaged her chances of a happy marriage. On the other side, Alfred Kinsey, with a sample size and a filing cabinet, saying half of those same married women have already had it. These 2 facts exist at the same moment in American history. They are both widely known. Neither one changes the other. The era simply holds them in both hands and agrees not to look down. Your neighbour Mrs. Patterson has read the Kinsey report. She has read it the way you read something you intend to have opinions about at a later date, and then never do. She sets its spine out on the shelf behind the other books. It faces inward now. The shelf has made a decision. The mathematics get uncomfortable in Edith Halloran's kitchen on a Wednesday afternoon. If you are a married woman in 1953 and you are in this room with 9 other married women, statistically 5 of you share a category that the remaining 5 would publicly say disqualifies a woman from happiness. Nobody is going to sort it out. There is a jello mold on the counter green, jeweled, and it requires attention. A copy of the report sits on the side table in Dr. Eldridge's waiting room in Cincinnati. A woman, 3 chairs down, glances at the cover, looks at the lamp instead, then glances back. She does not pick it up. The bookshop clerk at Schwartz's on Main wraps another copy in brown paper for a man who asked for it without looking at her, and the brown paper is doing some of the work the man cannot quite do himself. Mrs. Patterson's husband finds her copy on the nightstand on a Saturday morning, picks it up, sets it back down, spine out the way she had it, and goes to make coffee. He does not mention it that day. He does not mention it the next day either. Of course, the public response is not silence exactly. Congress holds hearings. A congressman from New York calls Kinsey's funding a threat to American family life. The Rockefeller Foundation, which has been quietly bankrolling the research, stops quietly bankrolling the research. Kinsey dies in 1956, 3 years after the female volume, attributed by his physician to a heart condition and by anyone paying attention to a schedule that had not included rest since 1938. Meanwhile, you are 19, and you have read exactly 1 paragraph of the Kinsey report, standing in a drugstore in 1954, because the copy was shelved next to the aspirin, and you had 30 seconds before your mother came around the corner. The paragraph contained a table. The table had columns. You put the book down before the columns resolved into meaning. You bought the aspirin. You have thought about the table twice a week since then without deciding what you think about it. Mr. Halpern, your school counselor, has a laminated chart on his office wall about reputation and decision-making. He references it during the spring assembly while Mrs. Halpern types insurance forms in the next room. In Bloomington, Indiana, the Kinsey filing cabinet holds the actual numbers, cross-indexed and peer-reviewed and not invited to assemblies. The 2 documents are in the same country. They have never met. A woman named Gloria, who works the cosmetics counter at the downtown Woolworths and has a very precise opinion about eyebrow pencil, has read the whole Kinsey report. She tells you this while ringing up your evening in Paris. She doesn't look up from the register. She hands you your change and says the number 50% the way a pharmacist says a dosage. Flat. Informational. Already moving on to the next thing. A sociologist named Willard Waller published a paper in 1937 called The Rating and Dating Complex, in which he described American college dating as a tier-based marketplace, in which young people are ranked against one another and expected to date within or slightly above their rank. By 1955, the paper is 20 years old and remains exactly correct. There are A boys and B boys and C boys at your school. There are A girls and B girls and C girls. Everyone knows their letter. The letter is decided by other people. Your letter isn't announced. Nobody hands it to you. You infer it from who asks you to dance and who doesn't, from where you sit at lunch, from whether the A boys look through you or at you when you walk past their table. The evaluation is continuous and silent. It is being conducted by everyone you have ever sat near in homeroom, and it does not adjourn. The criteria are specific. For boys, a car or access to one. A letter jacket with legitimate letters on it, not decorative ones. Money enough to pay for a date without visibly calculating. Hair that behaves Vitalis or Brill Cream, both of which smell faintly medicinal. Like a petroleum product that has decided to have ambitions. For girls, the right skirt, the right shoes, the right way of laughing at things. Your crinoline, dipped in sugar water to hold its shape, smells faintly sweet in a warm room. It crinkles when you sit. You sit anyway. You've been sitting in architectural skirts since 7th grade. A boy named Gary Hollenbeck, who is a solid B+, asks you to a movie on a Friday. He picks you up in his father's 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air vinyl seats, a faint ghost of cigarette smoke, and the unmistakable presence of someone else's evening in Paris perfume from the previous Friday. Gary does not mention this. You do not mention this. The car holds its silence professionally. The date costs Gary somewhere between $2.50 and $4. Movie tickets, plus a cherry Coke at the Walgreens counter, afterward 10 cents for the Coke, the rest for the movie, and the whole enterprise lands at roughly 2 weeks of spending money. Gary's weekly allowance is $2.80. He has been saving. He does not say he has been saving. The financial architecture of the evening is invisible by design, and both of you know it. You are expected to be grateful without performing gratitude too visibly, interested without appearing too available, engaged without suggesting you'd engineered the invitation. Gary is expected to spend money he doesn't have on a schedule he can't sustain because the spending signals the sincerity. A college man in 1954 budgets $10 to $15 a month on dating. That's about 15% of his total budget, which is roughly the percentage a modern person might spend on subscriptions they've forgotten to cancel, except Gary remembers every cent of it. Meanwhile, your own ranking is being actively maintained by other girls who are watching, not maliciously, professionally. If Gary is a B+, and you are seen with him consistently, your position adjusts. If a boy from the A column appears at your locker, everyone notices the column shift before you do. The system tracks this automatically. It doesn't need administrators. It runs on attention, and attention in a 1955 American high school is essentially a non-scarce resource. Of course, the system has a proprietary unit of currency, and it is the letter jacket. A boy's jacket draped over your shoulders in homeroom on a Monday morning is a public filing. It goes into the record. The record is kept by everyone simultaneously, which makes it extremely accurate and completely impossible to contest. You don't update a status. You wear the jacket to first period, and by second period the announcement has cleared the building. Both of you walk through your separate hallways with the information already distributed, which is either romantic or deeply efficient, depending on how you're feeling about it. On Monday morning, you stand in front of your bedroom mirror and assemble the standard uniform of a 15-year-old American girl in 1954, which is a knee-length plaid skirt, a pressed cotton blouse, a cardigan over the shoulders, a pair of folded white bobby socks, and a pair of two-tone saddle shoes that you polished with a wet cloth last night. The uniform tells the school you are well-behaved. It tells boys you are available. It tells other girls exactly where you sit in the tier. It is all of these things before you have spoken a word. The crinoline under the skirt is yours, dipped in sugar water last night and hung over the shower rod to dry, which means it now holds its shape with a faint structural confidence and smells like a bakery that someone tried to air out. It rustles when you walk. The rustling is not an accident. The rustling is the point. A girl with a properly stiffened crinoline takes up the right amount of room, not too little, which reads as poverty, and not so much that the skirt brushes both sides of a doorframe, which reads as showing off. The crinoline has calibrated your social footprint. You didn't do that. The crinoline did. The saddle shoe is a two-tone affair, white leather, black or brown saddle across the middle, and it communicates something in a language you were never formally taught. Scuffed shoes mean careless. Over-polished shoes mean trying too hard. Yours are correct. Mrs. Paulette Marsh, who teaches home economics third period and rotates the same 3 cardigans on a schedule you've now memorized, could clock the effort that went into your shoes from across the gymnasium. She would not comment. She doesn't have to. The shoes comment for themselves. The bobby sock is folded once, never twice, never left straight. This is not a rule that was written down anywhere. It is simply known. The way everyone knows which lunch table belongs to whom. A twice-folded sock places you at the lower edge of the acceptable register. A straight sock is a first-week mistake, the kind you make in September and correct by October. The fold is your credentials. You're presenting them now, walking down the hall, the crinoline announcing each step like a small, sweet-smelling parliament. Evelyn Duvall's 1950 book, Facts of Life and Love for Teenagers, laid out a step-by-step hierarchy of physical intimacy hand-holding at the bottom, going all the way at the top with social consequences noted at every rung. The uniform is the ground floor of that same structure. You are at hand-holding level before first period. The knee-length skirt confirms it. The folded sock confirms it. The pressed blouse confirms it. Mrs. Paulette Marsh, 3 doorways down, glances at the fold of your sock as you pass and gives a small approving nod, brisk, professional, and immediately filed. Now, the pencil skirt is a different matter entirely. Some girls wear them. Narrower at the hem, fitted through the hip. The pencil skirt requires a modified walk, shorter strides, a slight swivel that the plaid skirt does not, and your vice principal, Mr. Gerald Foss, has opinions about pencil skirts on school property that he has made clear twice in morning assembly this semester. The pencil skirt is not against the rules. It is, however, noted. There's a difference between those two things in 1954, and the difference lives in Mr. Foss's expression, when you pass him in the hallway. A 1,953 Ladies' Home Journal poll found that 86% of American women believed a girl who had premarital sex had significantly damaged her chances of a happy marriage. The pencil skirt is not premarital sex. But it is adjacent, in the logic of the era, to a category of adjacency that requires monitoring. Linda Pisarcik wore one to school in October, and Mr. Foss's hand paused on her hall pass for an extra 2 seconds before he signed it. Linda doesn't wear it on Tuesdays anymore. Before the dress, there is the crinoline, and before the crinoline, there is the sugar water. You stand in your kitchen on a Friday afternoon in 1956, dipping a layered tulle petticoat into a basin of warm water that you have stirred 2 cups of granulated sugar into. The sugar will make the crinoline hold its shape under your skirt at the spring formal tonight. The crinoline will be enormous. It will rustle. It will smell faintly of pancake syrup all evening. None of the boys will know why. The dress goes on over it. Then the crinolines push the skirt out into a wide circle that requires you to turn sideways to get through a standard doorway. You've done this calculation before. The downstairs hallway is fine. The bathroom at the dance venue is a known hazard. You'll manage it later with both hands on the stall door and a strategy borrowed from someone whose older sister explained it last autumn like field surgery. The perfume sits on your dresser in a cobalt blue bottle. Small, glass, and improbably confident cost under $1 at the 5 and dime. Smelling of something the manufacturer decided was Parisian in a broad, optimistic sense. You apply it to your wrists, your neck, the inside of each elbow, the full deployment. The bottle is so small it fits in a clutch purse next to a comb and a dime for the payphone. You bring both. You are prepared for the evening, and for the possibility that the evening requires an exit. His hair is Vitalis. You will smell it the moment he steps onto your porch. The Vitalis has a petroleum quality not unpleasant, more like medicinal, like someone's uncle has a strong position on personal grooming and will not be argued out of it. He'll have combed it smooth and flat, and it will hold that shape for approximately 40 minutes into the evening and then gradually develop its own opinion about where it wants to go. The economics of tonight are his problem. Technically, a movie ticket runs about 75 cents. The soda fountain afterward is another $1, maybe $1.25 if someone orders a sundae instead of a Coke, and nobody judges them, but everyone notes it. The full evening sits at around $3, which is slightly more than a week's allowance if he's been saving. According to a 1,953 survey in 17 magazine, the average weekly allowance for a teenage boy was $2.80. He has been planning this for 2 weeks. The crinoline took 15 minutes and 2 cups of domino sugar. These are not equivalent investments. He knows this. You know this. The crinoline knows this and rustles pointedly. A chaperone named Mrs. Patricia Greer stands near the gymnasium doors in a cardigan, and a look that suggests she has read Evelyn Duval's entire book and considers herself its field agent. She watches the dancing from a folding chair with the focused attention of someone monitoring a controlled experiment. The dance floor has a 2-foot clearance rule between couples that nobody has measured, and everyone interprets generously. Mrs. Greer measures it in her mind with a precision that doesn't require a ruler. At the soda fountain later, a cherry Coke costs 10 cents. The counter smells of vanilla extract and hot fudge and something faintly phosphate chemical underneath, like the building itself has been carbonated. You sit on a spinning stool and don't spin it because your crinoline makes spinning a structural event rather than a casual gesture. The stool is aware of this situation and stays cooperative. He will walk you home. At the porch he will pause. The porch light is on because your father has opinions about porch lights, and they are not subtle opinions, they are 7.5 watt opinions installed in a fixture that points directly at the front steps. Whatever happens on this porch happens in full illumination. The crinoline, still faintly fragrant, holds its enormous shape in the night air. You smell of evening in Paris and 2 cups of dissolved sugar. He smells of Vitalis and medium-level ambition. The porch light doesn't blink. It has never once blinked. The car you are sitting in is a 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air, 2-tone, turquoise and white, and the interior smells like 4 different things at once. Vinyl seat covers, the cigarette your date is finishing, a small spritz of Evening in Paris perfume from a cobalt blue bottle that cost 89 cents at Woolworths, and the residual petroleum tang of Vitalis hair tonic on his scalp. You sit in the front bench seat. There are no seat belts. The radio plays Patti Page very quietly. The engine ticks as it cools. The drive-in theatre is 3 miles east of town, and by 1958 there are roughly 4,000 of them operating across the United States. Everyone over the age of 12 understands they are not primarily for watching movies. The film tonight is something with Rock Hudson. You are not watching it. The speaker hangs from the half-open window, tinny and distant, and something explodes on screen while an insect pings softly against the windshield. The insect is more engaged with the film than you are. The window speaker is not a speaker. It's a chaperone, scratchy, distracted, and easy to ignore. The volume dial turns left. The film recedes. What replaces it is the specific, loaded silence of 2 people sitting on a bench seat with no armrest between them and approximately 4,000 drive-in theaters worth of precedent for what happens next. The Oak Park, Illinois Police Department has opinions about this exact arrangement. Starting in 1952, officers patrol the known parking areas on Friday and Saturday nights, not to watch the movies. A patrolman named Sergeant Gerald Kowalski, clipboard in hand, flashlight off but present, walks the rows slowly, peering at fogged windows without touching them, writing down license plates and, when he can confirm them, the names of any minors he finds inside. Sometimes he calls the parents. The notebook fills up faster on Saturday nights. It fills up faster in summer. The notebook doesn't comment on this, but it doesn't need to. You are not in Oak Park, but the principal travels. There's a version of Sergeant Kowalski in most towns, sometimes an actual officer, sometimes a neighbour with a clear sightline to the street, sometimes just the knowledge that someone is probably watching and will mention it to someone else by Tuesday. The surveillance doesn't need to be present to be effective. It just needs to be plausible. Now, the bench seat itself is doing a kind of social work here. The front bench seat of a 1955 Bel Air is 6 feet of vinyl, with no armrest in the middle, which means there's no structural reason 2 people can't sit anywhere on it. This is, architecturally speaking, the most progressive thing about the automobile. The back seat has more clearance. The back seat also has implications. Where you sit on the bench seat is a statement. Where you end up on the bench seat is a negotiation. The Bel Air doesn't take minutes, but it could. Evelyn Duvall's 1950 book Facts of Life and Love for Teenagers laid out a hierarchy of physical intimacy with the careful precision of a building permit, hand-holding, then arm around the shoulder, then goodnight kiss, and so on up a ladder where each rung has a warning label attached. The book sold well. The final rung is described only as going all the way, which the book treats as a destination you could reach by accident if you weren't careful about seating arrangements. A 1,953 Ladies' Home Journal poll found that 86% of American women believed a girl who had premarital sex had significantly damaged her chances of a happy marriage. Kinsey's 1953 report found that 50% of married American women had already had premarital sex. Both of these things are true at the same time, in the same country, in the same year. Nobody calls a meeting about it. The cigarette gets stubbed out in the ashtray built into the door panel. Patti Page keeps playing. The vinyl is warm where you've been sitting on it. Outside, someone 3 cars over starts their engine and leaves, which is either a statement of virtue or a sign the movie was really that bad. The speaker hangs in the window, still talking to no one. You are 23 years old, single, working as a typist at an insurance company, and renting a small furnished room on the 2nd floor of a brick building near Gramercy Park. You signed the lease last Tuesday. On page 2, in a paragraph titled House Rules, there is a clause stating that no male visitor is permitted on the premises after 10 o'clock in the evening, that no male visitor is permitted in your private room at any hour, and that violation will result in immediate termination of the lease. You initialed next to the clause. The clause is not unusual. It's standard. Most rooming houses for single women in 1953 carry some version of it, and the landlady a missus. Dorothea Fitch, who wears the same pearl earrings every day as if they are a uniform, has explained that it protects the character of the building. The character of the building is a real thing, apparently. It has needs. Missus. Fitch's 10 o'clock rule exists because the assumption is architectural. An unchaperoned woman in a private room with a man will do something the lease cannot name and will therefore not name. The clause doesn't say what the violation is. It doesn't have to. You both know. The initialing is the acknowledgement. Mrs. Fitch sits in a wing-back chair near the front hallway from 9:30 onward on weekend evenings, alert, upright, and reliably affronted, wearing a cardigan and reading a magazine she never appears to turn the page of. A man who rings the bell at 9:55 gets a look that communicates, without ambiguity, that he has 3 minutes and she is counting them. He has never met Mrs. Fitch before. He adjusts his posture anyway. Your room is small. There's a single bed, a dresser with a mirror that tilts, a window that faces a brick wall, and a hot plate you're not supposed to use but do. The lease also prohibits cooking in the room. The hot plate has opinions about this restriction and keeps them to itself. Now, the rooming house isn't the only institution with this particular concern. Your employer has one too, expressed differently. The insurance company where you type 50 words per minute doesn't put it in writing, but the understanding is clear enough. A woman who marries must stop working, or at least must not expect to keep her desk. Several women on your floor were hired with this knowledge attached. Not announced, just understood, the way weather is understood. The 1,952 American Management Association survey found 23 of 25 major corporations had formal policies discouraging romantic relationships between employees at different organizational levels. This is the Spotify terms of service of mid-century professional life, except instead of a song cue, it governs who you can have lunch with and whether that lunch ends your career. None of this touches the bank. The bank is its own category of institution. You can open a savings account in your own name, that's fine. But if you want a credit card, if you want a line of credit, a loan, a financial instrument of any real mobility, a married woman needs her husband's signature until 1974. You are not married. You are 23. The bank has already worked out how it feels about your future, and it has filed that feeling under pending spousal approval. Back in the building, Mrs. Fitch has a notebook. Not the Oak Park police kind, she doesn't write down names. She just remembers. She remembers the Tuesday you came home at 10:14 with a man carrying your groceries. She remembers the way he handed them over at the door rather than stepping inside, which was, technically, correct behaviour, and she noted this. She told you so, approvingly, over the mail slots the next morning. She said you seemed like a sensible girl. You said thank you. The lease runs through next May. The character of the building will be maintained. You work in a typing pool on the 7th floor of the Equitable Life Building, alongside 11 other women, supervised by a Mr. Pendergast, whose office has a glass interior wall. A new memo has just been pinned to the corkboard in the break room. The memo states that employees are reminded that romantic relationships between staff at different levels of the organizational hierarchy are not in keeping with the company's standards of professional conduct. A 1,952 American Management Association survey will later show that 23 out of 25 major American corporations issue this exact memo. The memo doesn't name anyone. It doesn't have to. Everyone in the typing pool reads it at 10:14 a.m. on a Tuesday and immediately knows who it is about. Gloria, third desk from the left, doesn't look up from her. Underwood. The Underwood does not comment. It types slightly louder for the rest of the morning, which is as close to solidarity as office equipment gets. Mr. Pendergast's glass wall is not a wall. It's a statement clear and vertical. From his desk he can see every one of you, all day, without turning his head more than 45 degrees. This is presented as managerial efficiency. It functions more like a terrarium, except the fish are expected to type 60 words per minute and not speak to anyone above their pay grade in a personal capacity. The memo has clarified what personal capacity means. Personal capacity means the elevator, the break room, and the parking structure on Tuesdays after 6. Of the 25 corporations surveyed, 2 had no policy on this. 2. Those 2 companies are not named in the survey, and it's probably best that they aren't, because the other 23 would not invite them to anything. The woman at the desk next to yours, a Patricia Hollenbeck, has been here 4 years. She eats lunch at her desk every day with a wax paper sandwich and a thermos of coffee that smells faintly of the morning she is still trying to escape. Patricia once had coffee with a man from the actuarial department on the 9th floor. Not a date. Coffee. The coffee lasted 35 minutes. She's been eating at her desk since February. The thermos agrees with this arrangement and does not ask questions. The memo does its real work in the 11 days afterward. Patricia adjusts her posture near the elevator bank on Wednesday. Gloria laughs slightly less loudly at something a man from the 9th floor says in passing on Thursday. The air in the break room gets a little more careful by Friday afternoon. The memo doesn't need teeth. Mr. Pendergast's glass wall has teeth. Mr. Pendergast himself is at the level, technically, where the policy does not apply to him. The policy applies downward. This is explained nowhere in the memo. It is understood completely by everyone in the typing pool by 1017A. Diane doesn't care. There is always one. Diane sits at the far end near the window, and she is engaged to a man from the contracts department on the 11th floor. She wears the ring to work. The ring is small and correct and sits on her left hand like a tiny official objection. She's handing in her notice at the end of the month, which is the acceptable resolution. The company finds this tidy. The typing pool will miss her. Nobody says so. Somewhere on the wall of your high school civics classroom in 1955, there is a large laminated map of the United States. And on this map, if you knew to colour them in, 30 of the states would be one shade and 18 of them would be another. The 30 states are the ones that still have laws on the books prohibiting marriage between a white person and a non-white person. The teacher has never coloured the map in. The map has never been mentioned. The law is, however, exactly as real as the map. Virginia's version is called the Racial Integrity Act of 1924, and it defines a white person as someone with no trace of blood other than Caucasian. Not a little, not some, none. The state has been enforcing this definition for 30 years without apparent embarrassment. Alabama's version classifies violators as felons and prescribes imprisonment at hard labor. The statute does not specify which labor. The statute does not feel it needs to. Mildred Jeter and Richard Loving are the ones who discover what the map means when you try to live on it. They're from Caroline County, Virginia. They drive to Washington, D.C. In June of 1958, marry legally there, and drive home. 5 weeks later, on the morning of July 11th, a sheriff and 2 deputies let themselves into the Lovings' bedroom with flashlights at 2 in the morning. Someone has called in a tip. Mildred points to the marriage certificate hanging on the wall. The sheriff looks at it. This is not, he explains, the relevant document. The relevant document is Virginia law, and Virginia law is not interested in what Washington, D.C. thinks. Judge Leon Bazile sentences them to 1 year in prison each, suspended on the condition that they leave Virginia and do not return together for 25 years. 25 years. Not a calendar error. Not a typo. Richard is 24. In 1959, asked to explain his reasoning in writing, Judge Bazile writes that God placed the races on separate continents and that this constitutes sufficient judicial authority. The opinion does not cite additional sources. It doesn't feel it needs those either. Now, the map isn't entirely uniform. California's Supreme Court struck down its own anti-miscegenation law in 1948, 10 years before the Lovings' bedroom had deputies in it. The case was brought by Andrea Perez and Sylvester Davis, a Mexican-American woman and a black man who wanted to marry in a Catholic ceremony and were refused a license. Their argument was that the state was blocking them from receiving a religious sacrament, a First Amendment claim, not a racial one. The California Supreme Court agreed. This is the most California solution to a civil rights crisis that California ever produced, and it worked, which is more than could be said for most of the other 29 states still holding the line. Margaret Kincaid, a clerk at the Washoe County Courthouse in Reno, keeps a notary stamp on the left side of her desk and a small dish of hard candy on the right. The stamp is brass, heavy, and reliably efficient. She stamps a great many documents. She has refilled the candy dish twice this week. Reno is, in 1955, granting roughly 3,500 divorces a year, because Nevada requires only 6 weeks of residency to qualify. You establish residency, wait 6 weeks, and the marriage concludes. The Washoe County Clerk's office stamps the decree, and you take the next train home. The Lovings move to Washington, D.C. They live there quietly for years. Mildred writes a letter to Attorney General Robert Kennedy in 1963 asking whether anything can be done. He refers her to the ACLU. The ACLU takes the case. In 1967, the Supreme Court unanimously rules in Loving v. Virginia that anti-miscegenation laws are unconstitutional. The map changes. On paper, South Carolina keeps its law on the books until 1998. Alabama keeps its until 2000. When Alabama finally puts it to a popular vote, 40% of voters choose to keep the law. The law loses. 40% is still a number that exists and has to go somewhere after the election is over. It goes back into the county and sits down. You wake up to flashlights. It is 2 o'clock in the morning on the 11th of July, 1958, in a small wood frame house in Caroline County, Virginia, and you are Mildred Loving, 20 years old, asleep beside your husband Richard, 24. The two of you were married 5 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., because Virginia would not marry you. A sheriff and 2 deputies, acting on a tip from a neighbor, have pushed open your unlocked front door and walked down your hallway. The flashlights cross your bedroom doorway. The sheriff asks Richard who the woman in the bed is. Richard points to the marriage certificate on the wall. He had framed it. The frame is plain, wooden, and unenthusiastically appreciated. The sheriff reads the certificate, then reads it again, then turns it over and reads the back. He tells Richard, "That's no good here. 3 people are now standing in your bedroom at 2 in the morning, and the problem, as far as the state of Virginia is concerned, is your marriage certificate hanging 4 feet above your headboard. You are both arrested. You are taken in your nightgown. The charge is cohabiting as man and wife against the peace and dignity of the Commonwealth. That is the actual legal language. Peace, dignity. The judge who sentences you is named Leon Bazile. He gives you 1 year in prison each, then suspends the sentence on one condition. You must leave Virginia and not return together for 25 years. Not separately, together. The state isn't banning you from Virginia. It's banning your marriage from Virginia, which requires you to believe geography is what makes a marriage real, the way a bouncer might decide the wedding ring stops working at the county line. Judge Bazile, writing in 1959, explains his reasoning. God, he writes, placed the races on separate continents. The fact that ships exist is apparently not addressed. You move to Washington, D.C. You write a letter to Robert F. Kennedy. Kennedy forwards it to the American Civil Liberties Union. 2 lawyers named Bernard Cohen and Philip Hirschkopf take the case. It takes 9 years. 9 years of visiting Virginia in separate cars, or not at all, or arriving at family funerals and watching the clock against a state line deadline. What you are actually guilty of was sleeping. Richard is white. You are a woman of black and Rappahannock Native American descent. You both grew up in the same county, on the same roads, around the same people. You were not a statement. You were not an act of protest. You were 2 people from Caroline County who wanted to sleep in your own house. The state of Virginia treated that as a felony. Virginia's Racial Integrity Act of 1924, still fully operational in 1958, defined white as a person with no trace of non-Caucasian blood. Not some, not a measurable amount. No trace. The law also required every birth in the state to be registered by race, a paperwork project so ambitious it needed its own bureaucrat. A registrar named Walter Plecker spent decades writing letters to county clerks, correcting birth certificates, and personally reclassifying families he considered suspiciously ambiguous. He called this work. He ran what was essentially a one-man ancestry.com, except the family tree had only 2 acceptable branches and Plecker pruned the rest with a fountain pen. The filing cabinet was full and held the line. On the 12th of June 1967, the Supreme Court rules unanimously in Loving v. Virginia that anti-miscegenation laws violate the 14th Amendment. Chief Justice Earl Warren writes the opinion. The phrase white supremacy appears in it, describing the purpose of Virginia's law, which is not something that appears in many Supreme Court opinions and which the state of Virginia does not dispute. You don't give many interviews after 1967. In 2007, on the 40th anniversary of the decision, you release a statement. You say you believe all Americans, no matter their race, no matter their sex, no matter whom they love, should have that same freedom to marry. You say it simply, without fanfare, in a written statement, from your home in Caroline County, Virginia, where you have finally been allowed to live. 6 months later, you are sitting in a courtroom in Bowling Green, Virginia, watching Judge Leon Bazile read his ruling aloud from a typed page. The Lovings have pleaded guilty. The judge sentences each of them to 1 year in prison. He then suspends the sentence on one condition. They must leave the state of Virginia and not return together for 25 years. In his written opinion, which he will publish in 1959, Judge Bazile explains that God placed the races on different continents and that this geography indicated a divine intent that they not mix. Basile reads the line from the typed page in front of him. The court reporter types the words "different continents" without looking up. Mildred sits in the second row with her hands folded in her lap. Richard sits beside her. Neither of them speaks. The opinion, once read, is filed in the courthouse record room in a manila folder labelled in pencil on the tab, where it will sit on a metal shelf for the next 8 years. The Lovings move to Washington, D.C. Richard drives construction. Mildred raises their children in a city that is not home. They cannot attend a family funeral in Virginia together. They cannot visit Richard's parents as a couple. The 25 years stretch out in front of them like a lease with no exit clause, signed by someone who did not consult them about the terms. The math is strange. 25 years from 1,959 is 1,984. The Lovings are in their early 20s. The sentence, if followed, would consume their entire young adulthood, their children's childhoods, and most of what most people would call their lives. Basile has effectively sentenced them to a different version of the same life, in a different place, until they were too old to remember why it had mattered. Mildred writes a letter. She writes it in 1963, addressed to Robert F. Kennedy's Justice Department, explaining her situation in plain language. Someone there forwards it to the American Civil Liberties Union. 2 attorneys, Bernard Cohen and Philip Hirschkopf, take the case for free. Cohen is 26 years old. Hirschkopf is 25. The case they're picking up will eventually go to the Supreme Court. Nobody in that chain of events, not Mildred, not the forwarded letter, not the 2 young lawyers, is operating inside a system that was designed to help them. Now, the Virginia statute they're fighting isn't a relic. The Racial Integrity Act of 1924 is active law, maintained by the state with genuine institutional commitment. A clerk named Walter Plecker spent decades reclassifying birth certificates, reclassifying people to keep the racial categories clean. He did this from a desk, with a fountain pen and a typewriter and a stack of carbon paper. The filing cabinet was, in its way, the enforcement mechanism. It didn't shout, it just held its position, drawer after drawer, year after year. The case reaches the Supreme Court in 1967. Chief Justice Earl Warren writes the unanimous opinion. The phrase he uses is, "the freedom to marry." The ruling comes down on June 12th. In Virginia, this is now called Loving Day, which is either a beautiful accident of naming or the universe briefly doing something right on purpose. The Lovings do not move back. Caroline County is home. It stays home. Mildred Loving issues a public statement in 2007, 40 years after the decision, from her house in Central Point, Virginia. She says she believes all Americans should have the right to marry the person they love. She says this quietly, in plain language, from a county that once arrested her in her bedroom at 2 a.m. for doing exactly that. The statement does not announce itself as historic. It doesn't need to. 10 years before the Lovings' arrest, in a Los Angeles County clerk's office, a woman named Andrea Perez and a man named Sylvester Davis attempt to obtain a marriage license. She is Mexican-American. He is black. They are both Catholic and have been attending the same parish. The clerk denies the license under California's anti-miscegenation statute. The couple sues. Their lawyer argues, on First Amendment grounds, that the state of California is preventing them from receiving a sacrament of their church. In 1948, the California Supreme Court strikes the law down. California becomes the first state in the country to do so. The argument is elegant and specific. The state isn't just restricting who you can marry, it's restricting who you can receive communion beside, who you can stand next to at the altar, which sacrament you are permitted to access. The Catholic Church, whatever else it had opinions about in 1948, and it had opinions about nearly everything considered marriage, a sacrament. The state, the argument goes, is inserting itself between 2 baptized Catholics and their church. The court agrees. 4 of 7 justices sign on. It's a narrow win, delivered without fanfare, in a courthouse that smells like filing dust and floor wax. The ruling changes everything in California immediately. Perez and Davis get their license. They get married, the law is gone, but California in 1948 is also, and this requires no editorializing to land, not the rest of the country. There are still 29 other states with statutes on the books. The ruling doesn't travel, it doesn't replicate, it sits in California, doing its work in California, while everywhere east of Nevada continues exactly as before. The Lovings won't be arrested for another 10 years. A clerk named Margaret sits behind the counter in that Los Angeles office with a form in front of her. The form is grey and two-page. She stamps it. She does not comment. The form has a line for race. It has always had a line for race. After 1948, in California, that line stops meaning what it meant, which is not the same thing as the line disappearing. The form keeps the line just loses its teeth. The First Amendment strategy is narrow on purpose. The Perez argument doesn't say the law is wrong because equality demands it. It says the law is wrong because it's blocking a religious practice. It's a narrow key for a very specific lock. The strategy works in 1948, partly because it doesn't ask the court to decide anything sweeping about race. It asks the court to decide something about jurisdiction. Can California overrule a priest? Apparently not. The decision is 4-3. One of the dissenting justices writes that the legislature, not the courts, should handle this. He is not wrong that the legislature could handle it. The legislature simply hasn't. Andrea Perez is 23. Sylvester Davis is around the same age. They have been attending St. Patrick's Church in Los Angeles, sitting in the same pews, taking the same Eucharist, going through the same pre-Cana classes that the church required of engaged couples. The church, notably, does not object to their marriage. The church has already said yes. The only entity in the room that says no is the county clerk, who is not a priest, who has not met them before, and who is operating on a statute passed in 1850. The statute is older than the electric light. It has simply not been looked at hard enough until now. 19 years pass between Perez v. Sharp and Loving v. Virginia. 19 years in which California has no anti-miscegenation law, and most of the country does. That's a long time to be the only state that's figured something out. The Lovings get married in Washington, D.C. In 1958, they can't marry in Virginia, so they cross the border, get the license, and come home. And within 5 weeks, a sheriff with a flashlight is standing in their bedroom. Perez and Davis in California are not standing in their bedroom at 2 a.m. with a sheriff. They're just married. You are sitting at the dining room table of your fiancé's family in a Catholic neighborhood of Boston, and her parish priest has come to the house with a single sheet of paper and a fountain pen. You are Methodist. She is Catholic. The Church of Rome will permit the marriage only if you, the non-Catholic party, sign a document called the Anti-Nuptial Declaration. The declaration pledges that any children born to the marriage will be raised in the Catholic faith. The priest places the document on the table. The pen is uncapped. He waits. The document is not a suggestion. It isn't a conversation starter or a goodwill gesture between faiths. It's a canonical requirement, formal and binding, signed in ink, witnessed by a priest, and filed with the diocese. You're not joining the church. You're simply agreeing to raise your future children inside it. The distinction matters enormously to the church. It matters slightly less to you, sitting here in your good slacks while your fiancé's mother refills the coffee cup you didn't ask for. Father Hannigan, let's call him Father Hannigan. Because there is absolutely a Father Hannigan in this scenario, slides the paper another 1/4 inch toward you. Not aggressively, pastorally. He has done this before. He has done this many times before, and his expression suggests he has all evening and possibly all of eternity. What you are actually signing is the cover charge. The Anti-Nuptial Declaration has been standard Catholic practice in the United States since the early 20th century, and by the 1950s it is essentially the entrance fee for marrying into a Catholic family. The Catholic spouse has already promised, separately, to raise the children Catholic and to work toward the conversion of the Protestant one. That promise was made before you arrived. You weren't in the room for it. You are only in the room for your half. The document itself is roughly 1 page. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't present alternatives. It lists what will happen and asks for your name at the bottom, which is basically a terms of service agreement for the next generation of people who don't exist yet. Your fiancé is watching you from across the table with an expression that is doing several things at once. There's love in it. There's apology in it. There's also a faint quality of someone who grew up in this house and has always known this moment was coming, the way you know a train is scheduled without having to check. The 1,957 Marshall-Sklair study found that 90% of American Jewish parents preferred their children marry within the faith. Catholic pressure ran similarly high, just with better paperwork. Protestant communities leaned on social consequence rather than formal documentation. Nobody handed you a form, they just stopped inviting you to things. The apparatus varied by denomination. The intention didn't. Now, the pen. It is a good pen. Black, weighty, and quietly serious. A Parker 51 most likely, because this is a priest in 1957, and the Parker 51 is the pen a careful man carries. It sits on the white tablecloth next to the document. The tablecloth has been ironed specifically for tonight. The tablecloth has opinions about the seriousness of the occasion, and it is not wrong. You sign. Most men sign. The ones who don't sign don't marry the girl, and the ones who don't marry the girl are not sitting at this table. The document goes back to Father Hannigan, who caps the pen with the quiet satisfaction of a notary who has done something real. The coffee is poured again. Someone brings out a plate of cookies. The matter is settled in the way that Catholic matters are settled formally, irreversibly, and then immediately followed by refreshments. In Evanston, Illinois, in the spring of 1953, the daughter of a Methodist minister named Reverend Hollister announces at Sunday dinner that she has accepted a marriage proposal from a young man named Aaron Greenberg, who works at his father's accountancy firm downtown. Aaron is Jewish. The Reverend says nothing during dinner. The next Sunday, 3 members of the congregation request a private meeting with the Reverend in the church office after the service. The congregation has views. The views are communicated. Within 4 months, the Hollister family quietly moves to another city. No document was signed, no law was broken, nobody appeared in court. The congregation simply made their position clear in a room with the door closed, and the door never opened the same way again. The handle is brass and cold. The pressure arrives in the length of a pause before someone says hello. It lives in the casserole that doesn't show up when Aaron comes to dinner. At the church social on May 17th, Mrs. Beverly Aldrich moves 3 folding chairs an inch and a half to the left and slides her own chair into the resulting gap so that Reverend Hollister's daughter ends up sitting next to no one. Reverend Hollister sees Mrs. Aldrich do this from across the fellowship hall. He sips his coffee. He doesn't move toward the chairs. The Sclair study in 1957 will find that 90% of American Jewish parents prefer their children marry within the faith. The preference runs in both directions across nearly every denomination, and in Protestant communities it doesn't always arrive as theology. It arrives as the social calendar. You get removed from it. Not announced, not explained. Just quietly uninvited from the couple's dinner rotation, which in Evanston in 1953 is the spiritual equivalent of excommunication less Latin. Same result. Aaron Greenberg, for his part, has his own version of this problem. His mother, Shirley, is setting her good tablecloth out on Friday nights for a reason, and the reason is that she's expecting Aaron to eventually bring home someone whose grandmother kept the same kind of tablecloth. Shirley doesn't say this at dinner. She says it by how many times she mentions her friend Marilyn Kaplan's daughter Ruth, who is studying at Northwestern and is, Shirley adds, very poised. She adjusts the tablecloth as she says it. The tablecloth has been saying this for 6 weeks. The pressure comes from all directions simultaneously, like 4 different neighbours mowing their lawns at the same time and all of them aimed at your yard. The Hollister daughter is caught between the chair arrangements at church and Aaron's mother's tablecloth, and neither of those things is written down anywhere as a rule. Mrs. Aldrich, 3 weeks later, mentions to Mrs. Quigley over the fellowship hall coffee urn that the Hollisters might be more comfortable at a different congregation. Mrs. Quigley nods. The coffee urn, small, chrome, and faintly perspiring, sits between them like a chaperone. Mrs. Quigley mentions the same thing to Mrs. Brubaker by Wednesday. By October, the Hollister moving truck is parked outside the parsonage. Mrs. Aldrich's chairs are back where they were in March. The fellowship hall does not appear to remember that anyone has left. One evening, Margaret Hollister was the minister's daughter with a reliable seat near the front. The next morning, she is the family that moved. In a railroad apartment in Spanish Harlem in 1956, a 17-year-old girl named Maria has been seeing a boy from a different block, not a Puerto Rican boy, an Italian boy from a neighborhood 17 blocks west. They have been meeting on the steps of the public library because the steps are considered neutral ground. Her uncle has begun to notice. His friends have begun to notice. There is no law on any books anywhere in New York City forbidding this relationship. There do not need to be. The neighborhood has its own laws and they are enforced locally. The enforcement mechanism is not a judge or a sergeant. It's a look held 2 seconds too long across a stoop. It's a conversation that stops when you enter the bodega. It's your cousin appearing casually, always casually at the corner where you said you were going to be. The neighborhood doesn't send a formal notice. The neighborhood just becomes smaller until you make a different choice. Maria knows the map before she sits down on those library steps. She knows which blocks belong to which families. She knows which stoops are auditing her. She knows that her aunt on 113th Street has an opinion that has not yet been spoken aloud, but is fully formed and waiting. The social geography of a 1956 New York neighborhood is drawn in lines you cannot see and are expected to have memorized. Nobody hands you the map. The map is the neighborhood. You learn it by moving through it wrong. Her uncle, a man named Hector, stops by the library steps one afternoon. He doesn't sit down. He adjusts his hat brim with 2 fingers and looks at the Italian boy for approximately 4 seconds longer than the conversation requires. Then he says something quiet and pleasant to Maria in Spanish and leaves. The Italian boy doesn't speak Spanish. He smiles because he doesn't know what else to do. The smile doesn't help. That 4-second look contains a complete sentence, possibly a paragraph. Hector doesn't raise his voice once. Hector goes home and tells his sister, Maria's aunt, what he saw. Maria's aunt then tells her own sister at the bakery on 116th. Within 40 hours, the news has travelled 3 blocks east, 2 south, and into the kitchen of every cousin who matters. Nobody asked the card players if they wanted new hands, and yet the deck has been reshuffled by Saturday evening. The pressure isn't personal. It's the entire family kitchen, warm and fragrant, already deciding for her. Meanwhile, 17 blocks west, the Italian boy's mother is asking questions about where he's been going on Tuesday afternoons. She does not ask about Maria by name yet. She doesn't need to. She has a neighbour, Mrs. Cataldo, who has a niece who takes the same bus route home from work, Mrs. Cataldo mentioned something to the boy's mother the way you mention a mild weather forecast neutrally, helpfully, as a service. Surveillance in 1956 doesn't require a notebook. It requires a neighbourhood, and a neighbourhood is basically a surveillance apparatus that also serves dinner. The library steps hold for about 6 more weeks. Then Maria's aunt does speak, out loud, at the kitchen table on a Sunday. It takes 4 minutes. No voices are raised. There are no threats and no ultimatums, and nothing you could write down as a law. What there is, a very specific accounting of what the family has done together, what it has cost, what it is owed, and who is owed it. Maria listens. Her coffee cup is still warm. She doesn't say anything at all, which is its own kind of answer, and her aunt accepts it as such. The Italian boy waits on the library steps one more Tuesday. Then he doesn't come back. Nobody tells him not to. He just does the arithmetic, and the arithmetic is clear, and he goes home. It is the second weekend in December 1955, and you are standing at the top of a small set of carpeted stairs inside the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel on Park Avenue, wearing a white floor-length gown and elbow-length white gloves. You are 19. Your father is somewhere in the room in white tie. The orchestra is playing. A man with a microphone is about to read your name aloud to roughly 400 people, after which you will descend the staircase, curtsy, and be officially presented to society as eligible for marriage. The event is the International Debutante Ball, which debuted its first class in 1954 under a woman named Beatrice Joyce, and has, in the span of 1 year, become the most efficient marriage market mechanism money can organize. Not a dance, not a party, a clearinghouse. The gown is white because that means something. The gloves are elbow length because shorter means something else. The curtsy has been rehearsed for 3 weeks in a mirrored room by a woman named Madame Yvette, who is small and severe, and who corrects your spine like she's filing a complaint. Your family has spent a number to get you to the top of this staircase. Coming out parties in 1955 run between $5,000 and $50,000, which in today's terms lands somewhere between $56,000 and $500,000. The Waldorf charges for the ballroom, the orchestra, the flowers, and a per-person dinner that costs more than a week of groceries. There's also the gown, which is not off the rack. There's the fitting, the second fitting, and the third fitting your mother requested after the second fitting. The gloves alone cost $12. The gloves are consumables. You will not wear them again. Your escort is standing nearby in white tie and tails, which his mother selected and his father paid for, and which he is wearing with the expression of a man who has been told this is important and has decided to believe it. His name is Geoffrey, spelled the British way, which his family considers a personality. He offers his arm. You take it. The two of you will walk out together. He will pass you to your father at the base of the stairs, and your father will then present you formally to the room, which means he will hand you to the room like a document being filed. A woman across the landing, another debutante, 17, from a family with a Connecticut address and a New York checking account, adjusts her glove for the 4th time. Her name is Constance. She has been adjusting that glove since 6:30. The glove doesn't need adjusting. Constance needs something to do with her hands other than exist in front of 400 people waiting to assess her marriage potential. The glove has absorbed this entirely and has no opinion. Mrs. Beatrice Joyce sits at a small table near the orchestra pit with a clipboard and reviews the line of debutantes the way an admissions officer reviews a private school waiting list. You don't apply to the International Debutante Ball. You are invited. Mrs. Joyce knows your grandmother. Mrs. Joyce knew your great-aunt. Mrs. Joyce has a pencil graphite, slim and quietly authoritative, and she has used it to add 3 names this year and remove 2. Nobody says any of this out loud. What they say is, "Isn't she lovely?" What they mean is she from the right family? Does she have enough to bring to the arrangement? And has she been trained to run a household at the scale this zip code requires? The questions are polite because Mrs. Joyce's pencil is still in motion. The man with the microphone clears his throat. The ballroom quiets by about 60%, which is as quiet as 400 people in formal wear get. Your name rises into the room. You begin to descend. The stairs are carpeted in red, which is not a metaphor for anything. It is just the colour the Waldorf has always used, but it does mean that each step down is cushioned and silent, which gives the whole moment the quality of a dream where you're moving but can't hear your own feet. You reach the bottom. You curtsy. Your father smiles. The room applauds. You are, as of this moment, officially on the market. The orchestra resumes. In a small upstairs apartment on Cove Avenue in the Silver Lake neighborhood of Los Angeles, in November 1950, a man named Harry Hay has invited 4 other men to sit on borrowed kitchen chairs in his living room. The shades are drawn. The address of the meeting has been passed only by word of mouth. The group will eventually call itself the Mattachine Society. The minutes of the meeting will not be written down for several years. Existing as the group is about to exist is not, in any strict legal sense, illegal. It is also not, in any strict practical sense, safe. The law in 1950 is uncomplicated. Homosexual acts are criminal offences in every single US state. Not some states. Every state. The specific statutes vary: sodomy laws, morals charges, disorderly conduct, but the outcome is the same. Arrest. Criminal record. Name in the paper. Your name in the paper is sometimes the worst part. Not because of what the paper says, but because of who reads it before breakfast. Harry Hay knows this. He's 40 years old, a former Communist Party member with a list of things the government would already like to discuss with him, and he has just decided to add one more. He passes a bowl of crackers around the room because it's that kind of meeting, the kind where someone brings crackers, where the borrowed chairs don't quite match, where the radiator ticks in the corner like it's taking notes. One of the 4 men, a teacher named Rudy Gernreich, takes a cracker and eats it without sitting down. He doesn't sit the entire meeting. Nobody mentions this. The Mattachine Society will spend its first 2 years operating the way all genuinely dangerous organizations operate, carefully. No membership list, no letterhead, no address published anywhere. You find out about it the same way you find out about a good dentist in a city you've just moved to. Someone whispers a name, someone else confirms it with a look. The whole infrastructure is word of mouth. Word of mouth is the original end-to-end encryption. In San Francisco in 1955, Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon found the first lesbian organization in the United States in their apartment on Castro Street. 8 women at the first meeting. The name comes from a French poem obscure enough to sound like a book club, which is almost certainly the point. Their newsletter is called The Ladder. It has a mailing list. Keeping a mailing list of members in 1955 is an act of administrative courage that's difficult to fully appreciate from a distance of 70 years. The bar is the other gathering place, and the bar has its own problems. A plainclothes officer can enter any establishment, order a drink, and observe. If 2 men dance together, or touch, or sit too close, that's enough. The bar gets raided. Everyone inside gets their name written in a notebook that will follow them home and stay there. The LAPD runs a special unit for this. They have a budget. They have a quota. The quota is more or less met every month. You find the bar anyway. You find it because someone at work has a friend who mentioned a street corner, which led to a doorway, which led to a room with bad lighting and a bartender named Glenn who never introduces himself but always remembers your drink. Glenn has been remembering drinks since 1947. Glenn has also been arrested twice. He comes back both times. The bar has opinions about loyalty, and Glenn is its primary expression. Harry Hayes slides the bowl of crackers another inch toward Rudy, who is still standing. Rudy takes another cracker. Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, 800 miles north, sign the first issue of The Ladder with hands that are small and deliberate. The shades stay drawn. The address travels by whisper. The radiator keeps ticking. You are 16 years old, sitting on butcher paper on the edge of an examination table at your family doctor's office on a Tuesday morning in 1957. Your mother brought you in. She is sitting in a chair against the wall, reading a copy of Good Housekeeping. The doctor, who has known you since you were a toddler and who delivers Christmas cards to your house every year, is now going to perform what he and your mother have agreed to call a routine examination. The examination will determine whether you are still considered fit for marriage. The butcher paper makes a sound every time you shift your weight. You are trying not to shift your weight. The doctor washes his hands at the sink and asks your mother how the garden is coming along this year, and she says the hydrangeas are finally doing something. Nobody addresses you directly. You are the subject of the examination, not a participant in the conversation. The word your mother would not say in the car on the way over is hymen. The medical literature of the 1950s discussed its presence and condition in unmarried young women with the procedural seriousness of a building inspection. Articles in JAMA during this decade debated how physicians should document and report their findings, to whom, and under what circumstances. The doctor has a clipboard. The clipboard has a form. The form does not have a field for your opinion on any of this. Your mother has a question. So does Mrs. Patterson, who teaches algebra at your school and called your mother on Sunday after seeing you talk to a boy near the bleachers for what she considered a noticeable interval. The call lasted 9 minutes. Your mother said almost nothing during it. When she set the receiver back in its cradle, she stood at the kitchen window for another 2 minutes with one hand still on the phone, and then she went upstairs and made the appointment. A girl who visited the doctor under these circumstances was understood to have done so because someone, a parent, a school administrator, occasionally a judge, had a question. The question was always the same question, dressed in different language. A boy did not have a comparable appointment. The form had no second page for boys. It never did. Your mother turns a page of Good Housekeeping. There is an article visible from where you're sitting about a new way to organize a linen closet. The room smells of rubbing alcohol and the faint ghost of someone else's talcum powder. The examination table has a small step stool at its base, which you used to think was charming when you were 7 and coming in for a strep throat. The step stool has not changed. You have changed, which is apparently the issue. The doctor makes a note. He makes another note. He tells you to breathe normally, which is the kind of instruction that makes normal breathing immediately impossible. A physician named Dr. Harold Rubin published a paper in 1956 arguing that premarital physical examinations for young women served a legitimate social hygiene function. JAMA gave it a thoughtful editorial response, the way a magazine might thoughtfully respond to a recipe for soup. The paper was received without significant objection. It was, in the medical community's estimation, a reasonable position. Meanwhile, back in the waiting room of American public opinion, Kinsey's 1,953 report is sitting in a drawer somewhere, establishing that 50% of married American women had premarital sexual experience. The report has been read. The report has been set aside. The appointment continues. Your mother has moved on to the recipe section. There is a casserole involved. The doctor finishes and removes his gloves with the practiced snap of someone who does this regularly, and says everything looks fine, and your mother nods with the relief of someone who has just received a favourable inspection report on a house she is hoping to sell. Doctor. Eugene Ramirez, who is writing the note, who is snapping the glove, does not look up. He caps his pen. He has 3 more appointments before lunch. You slide off the table. The butcher paper tears slightly at the edge. Nobody mentions it. You retrieve your cardigan from the hook on the back of the door and put it on, one arm at a time, with the careful movements of someone who has just been assessed and passed and would prefer not to be assessed again anytime soon. Your mother stands, folds the good housekeeping under her arm and says, "Well, that wasn't so bad, was it?" You do not answer. The step stool is still charming. You have stopped thinking so. It is March 1959, and you walk into a pharmacy in New Haven, Connecticut, and approach the counter at the back. You are 22. You are married. You are not yet ready to have a child. You ask the pharmacist, quietly, what is available. The pharmacist looks at you for a long moment. Connecticut state law, derived from the 1873 Comstock Act and upheld every year since, prohibits the sale of contraceptive devices to anyone, including married couples. The pharmacist says he is sorry. He sells you a tin of aspirin instead, which you did not come in for. The tin costs 35 cents. You put it in your purse. The pharmacy smells of talcum powder and the faint chemical sweetness of a soda fountain running in the corner. A teenager at that counter is having a cherry Coke. You walk past him on your way out. Connecticut's law is not a quirk, it is a posture. The state has had it since 1879, and every legal challenge has bounced back off the wall like something the wall found mildly annoying. The law doesn't ask whether you're married. The law doesn't ask whether you have 3 children already, or a heart condition, or $17 in your bank account. The law has one position, and its position is no, and the position is very comfortable. The pill exists, technically. Researchers at Searle Pharmaceuticals have developed norethindrol, a synthetic hormone that, taken daily, prevents ovulation, and beginning in 1956, Dr. John Rock and Gregory Pincus tested it on women in Puerto Rico, where there were no Comstock-derived statutes to navigate, and, it should be noted, no one asked the women what they thought about being the test population. The pill works, the data is clear. The FDA is reviewing the application. None of this helps you in New Haven in 1959, where the law is still the law and the pharmacist is still sorry. Connecticut is essentially the Costco of pharmaceutical restrictions bulk. No exceptions, no exit interview. Margaret Sanger, who spent 40 years fighting this particular wall, is 79 years old this year. She helped fund the research. She is not in the pharmacy. She is in Tucson, and she is tired, and she has been arrested 8 times. The FDA approves the pill in May 1960. You note the date. You return to the pharmacy in New Haven. The pharmacist explains. With genuine regret, Gerald is his name, and he adjusts his glasses with one finger the way he always does when delivering unwelcome news that the approval is federal, not state. Connecticut's law is still state. The pill is now legal to manufacture, legal to prescribe in most of the country, and illegal to dispense here. Gerald puts his hand flat on the counter. He is sorry again. The aspirin tin is still 35 cents. Women in New Haven who want contraception now drive to New York or to Rhode Island, or they find a physician who will prescribe the pill for menstrual irregularity, which is the medical system's version of a side door left slightly open. The prescription says one thing. Everyone involved understands it means another. A nurse named Helen Costigan files the chart in a manila folder, slides it into the drawer marked RS, and adjusts her cardigan the way someone adjusts a curtain. Helen has been adjusting things for 9 years. Connecticut's law holds until 1965. Estelle Griswold, executive director of the Planned Parenthood League of Connecticut, opens a birth control clinic in New Haven in November 1961, specifically to get arrested, which she is, 10 days later, along with Dr. C. Lee Buxton. The case goes to the Supreme Court. In Griswold v. Connecticut, the court finds that married couples have a constitutional right to privacy in their bedroom. The decision is 7-2. The 2 dissenting justices feel the Constitution does not contain the word privacy. They are not wrong about the word. The aspirin tin, for what it's worth, contains no opinions on the matter. You and your husband have decided, after 11 years and 2 children, that the marriage is over. You have also decided that no one in either family is to know this was a mutual decision, because in New York State in 1956 a mutual decision is not legal grounds for divorce. The only legal grounds is adultery. Your husband, with the help of a referred attorney, has therefore arranged for a private detective and a young woman from a particular agency to photograph him in a hotel room in Midtown next Thursday afternoon. The photographs will be your case. Barbara is the woman from the agency. She does this twice a week. She arrives at the hotel before your husband does, drapes her coat beige wool over a chair near the window, and sits on the edge of the bed looking mildly inconvenienced. The private detective knocks twice. She adjusts her expression to something the camera will find suggestive. The photographer takes 3 frames. Barbara is home by 4. She has done nothing wrong under any law. She is technically a prop. Your husband checks out of the hotel by 3:30. He has a receipt. The receipt says nothing about what happened in the room, because nothing happened in the room, because the entire afternoon is a legal performance staged for a judge who everyone in the building understands is watching a legal performance. The judge will grant the divorce anyway. New York's divorce bar is not confused about what it is doing. It simply requires the paperwork. The logistics get expensive. The referred attorney is not cheap. The private detective charges by the hour. The hotel room, a mid-range double in Midtown Manhattan, runs about $12 a night. Add in the agency fee for Barbara's time, the film development, the notarized copy of the photographs, and the attorney's filing fee, and you are looking at somewhere between $200 and $300 to end your marriage legally in the state of New York. That's roughly $2,500 in 2024 money. The toll to confirm what you already know. Now, if that sounds excessive, consider the alternative. You could go to Reno. Nevada requires only 6 weeks of residency to qualify for a divorce, and by 1955, Washoe County is granting about 3,500 divorces a year, which makes it less a courthouse and more a checkout counter for marriages that have run their course. You rent a small apartment or a dude ranch cabin for 6 weeks, establish legal residency, file your paperwork, and come home single. The dude ranch part is real. Several Reno establishments specifically catered to waiting wives, offering horseback riding and clay shooting, so the 6 weeks felt less like a legal technicality and more like a particularly grim vacation. Reno costs money too. The train fare from New York, 6 weeks of lodging, meals, the attorney on the Nevada end, and you can't take the children during the waiting period without complicating the custody filing. So you leave them with your mother, who has been told you are visiting a friend. The friend does not exist. Your mother suspects this. Neither of you says so. Meanwhile, back in New York, your social calendar is already quietly reorganizing itself. Connie Aldrich, who has been your neighbor for 6 years and who you have had to dinner 8 times, has stopped calling, not conspicuously. She just hasn't called. The dinner parties in your building run on a couple's architecture, and you have just become a structural problem. A divorced woman at a dinner table in 1956 is the conversational equivalent of a missing chair leg. Everyone adjusts their weight away from it without discussing it. The photographs arrive in a brown envelope the following week. Your attorney keeps them. You will never see them. They are evidence, which means they belong to the process now, and the process is not sentimental about what it costs you to feed it. You arrive at the Reno train station in October 1955 with 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket. A small hotel called the Riverside has a room reserved for you for the next 43 nights. The Reno 6-week residency rule has been in place since the 1930s, and Washoe County now grants roughly 3,500 divorces a year, almost all of them to women who are not from Nevada. You will eat breakfast at the same diner every morning. You will play penny slots at the same casino every evening. On the 43rd day you will appear in court. The Riverside knows why you're here. The front desk clerk, a man named Harold, wears the same cardigan everyday brown, worn, and reliably ungoverned, and never asks follow-up questions. He hands you a key card without making eye contact. This is a professional courtesy. Half the women on your floor are also here for 6 weeks. You can tell by the suitcases 2, always 2, the exact number a person packs when they're not sure what the next chapter looks like, but they've committed to finding out. Reno in 1955 is, functionally, an Airbnb for ending your marriage. Except the host is a Nevada judge, and checkout is a court decree stamped in triplicate. The casinos exist because people need somewhere to be at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday when they are technically residents of a state they've never lived in before and won't live in again. The penny slots accept your coin with a sound like a small, polite cough. Nothing happens. You put in another penny. This is also your life right now, and the metaphor is not lost on you. The other women at the riverside form a loose social ecosystem within about a week. There is a woman named Patricia from Cleveland who cries at breakfast and is impeccably dressed by 9. There is a woman from Charleston who will not say what her husband did but has said the word fishing with tremendous feeling on 3 separate occasions. You eat eggs together. You discuss the weather. You are all, in the eyes of Nevada law, temporary residents engaged in the lawful pursuit of legal dissolution. In the eyes of your respective hometowns, you are gone for 6 weeks visiting a sick relative. The legal apparatus itself is not complicated. You establish residency by being physically present in Washoe County for 42 consecutive days. You file, a judge reviews the paperwork, you appear, say what's required, and the marriage ends. The whole proceeding takes about 8 minutes. 8 minutes, after which you are a different legal category of person than you were when you walked in. The bailiff does not offer congratulations. He doesn't offer condolences either. He just moves the file. 8 minutes in a courtroom costs considerably more than 8 minutes. Your hotel room, the train ticket, 6 weeks of eggs and penny slots and the occasional whiskey sour adds up to somewhere between $300 and $500, which is, in 1955, the rough equivalent of 2 months' salary for a secretary. The divorce industry in Washoe County generated approximately $3 million a year. Reno built actual casinos on the residency requirement. There is a gift shop near the courthouse that sells postcards. The postcards do not say what they are for, but everyone who buys one knows. On the 43rd morning, you pack both suitcases. Harold at the front desk takes your key without ceremony. Patricia from Cleveland is in the lobby with her own bags, heading to the same courtroom at 10, and you ride together in a taxi driven by a man named Gene, who has made this particular trip so many times he no longer asks which courthouse. He already knows. Both of you know this dance too well. You are 31, married, employed as a librarian, and standing at the customer service desk of First National Bank in St. Louis, Missouri, in the spring of 1958. You would like to open a checking account in your own name. The man at the desk slides a form toward you. On line 9 of the form there is a small printed instruction reading, "Signature of spouse," or adult male guarantor required. He hands you a second pen. You explain that you would prefer not to require your husband's signature. The man says, he understands. He waits. He is not being difficult. That is the important thing to understand. He is being the form. The form has existed for years and will exist for more years and has never once been asked to reflect on itself. You could try another bank. The next bank has a different logo and the same line 9. Here is what you can do on your own in 1958. You can earn money. You can deposit it with your husband's account number attached. You can spend it, cautiously, in increments small enough not to require paperwork. You can pay the gas bill, because the gas bill doesn't ask who you are. It asks only whether the amount is correct. You are also allowed to return library books, which, professionally speaking, is something. The logic runs like this. You are a credit risk not because of your income, your employment history, or your demonstrated ability to catalogue the entire Dewey Decimal System without incident, but because you are a wife. Wives, the banking system has decided, are temporary financial arrangements. You might become a widow. You might move. You might, in the privacy of your own marriage, make a purchase your husband wouldn't have authorized. The form doesn't say this. It just has line 9. Mr. Calloway. This is the man at the desk. His nameplate says Calloway, D, and the D stands for Douglas, does not enjoy this conversation. He has had this conversation before. He adjusts his pen holder 1/4 inch to the left while you talk, which is what Douglas Calloway does when he is waiting for something to be over. The pen holder is a small ceramic thing, offended on principle. It stays where he set it, a quiet monument to this exact moment. You can technically get around this. You can open a joint account, which is basically a checking account with a chaperone. Your husband's name appears first, in slightly larger print, for reasons the form doesn't explain but doesn't need to. Or you can find a male guarantor who isn't your husband, a father, a brother, an uncle willing to co-sign for your 10-cent Walgreens purchases and your library branch parking fees. The guarantor doesn't manage your money. He simply confirms, in ink, that you are the kind of woman whose money is manageable. It is not 1,850. It is 1,958. You have a car. You have a job that requires a master's degree. You have, In your purse, a personal check from your employer made out to your name in full. The check is real. The name is yours. Line 9 does not care. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which will eventually make Line 9 illegal, will pass in 1974. That is 16 years away. Douglas Calloway will have retired by then. The pen holder will still be slightly to the left. You take the second pen. You write your husband's name in the space provided. The form accepts it without comment. The form has always accepted it, without comment. This is the part where the form is very good at its job. It is November of the year 2000, and you are standing in a polling booth in Mobile, Alabama, looking at a state constitutional amendment on the ballot. The amendment proposes to formally repeal Alabama's anti-miscegenation language, which has been legally unenforceable since the Supreme Court's 1967 ruling in Loving v. Virginia, but has remained in the text of the state constitution for 33 subsequent years. You vote yes. 60% of Alabama voters that day also vote yes. The remaining 40% vote against the repeal. The amendment passes. The line stays exactly where you would have predicted it to stay. Alabama is not an outlier in the way that feels comfortable. South Carolina kept its anti-miscegenation language until 1998, kept it in the Constitution, with the rest of the living text. In Montgomery, a clerk in the Secretary of State's office files the printed text of the state constitution every year, with the racial marriage prohibition still in Section 102, the way the office has filed it since 1901. The clerk does not read Section 102, the clerk does not have to. The clerk files it because the document is the document, and the document gets filed. In 2000, the question on the Alabama ballot reads, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of Alabama of 1901 to repeal the language prohibiting the legislature from authorizing the marriage of any white person with a Negro or descendant of a Negro. Voters mark yes or no next to that sentence. What 1967 did is clear. Loving v. Virginia made anti-miscegenation laws constitutionally unenforceable in all 50 states on the 12th of June 1967. That's the date? What it did not do was edit the printed text of any state constitution. The statute sat there, technically dead, socially complicated. In some counties, practically useful to people who preferred a particular kind of neighborhood without having to say so out loud. Mildred Loving, for her part, did not consider herself an activist. She had married Richard in Washington, D.C. in 1958 because Virginia would not let her. She came home, the sheriff came in the dark. The case that reached the Supreme Court 9 years later started, in her account, with a letter she wrote to Robert Kennedy's Justice Department asking, fairly simply, whether this was supposed to be the law. It was. Then it wasn't. She said in a 2007 statement that she believed all Americans should have the freedom to marry the person they love. She said it plainly. She did not say it like a speech. She said it like someone who had been waiting a long time to say an obvious thing. The 40% in Alabama in the year 2000 did not explain themselves in the polling booth. They don't have to. That's the design feature of the ballot. The vote is yours and the reason stays inside. But the number lands flat regardless. 4 out of every 10 voters, in a state where the law had been constitutionally void for 33 years, looked at an amendment asking to remove dead language and voted to leave it. There's a long tradition in American governance of the text meaning less than the preference underneath it. The text was always available for exactly that kind of use. The arc of this particular piece of history does not bend dramatically. It does not resolve in a courthouse with music. It resolves in a voting booth in Mobile with a number, 60%, which is a majority, which is how it's counted. Which is also, depending on your arithmetic, 4 in 10 people voting to preserve the shell of a law that said a marriage like the Lovings was a felony. A delegate named Alvin Holmes had introduced the repeal bill in the Alabama legislature. He'd been introducing it for years. It kept not passing. He kept reintroducing it the way other people reintroduce a casserole recipe nobody asked for at the church potluck. Then it passed and went to the ballot, and the ballot came out 60-40, and Alabama's constitution was amended, and the language was removed. Holmes had been in the legislature since 1974. He was still there in 2000. He watched it go through. He did not appear to find it satisfying in the way a resolution is supposed to feel satisfying. He'd done this particular math before. So, you held a cherry Coke you couldn't quite afford. You wore a crinoline that had been dipped in sugar water and now smelled faintly like a bakery you hadn't visited. You passed a school ring across a lunch table without saying anything, because the ring did the talking. You sat in a Bel Air with the speaker hanging from the window while Patti Page played at a volume nobody had agreed to. You drove all the way to Washington, D.C. for a marriage certificate and drove home anyway, because home was the point. A sheriff stood in your bedroom at 2 a.m. with a flashlight and an opinion about geography. Officer Wendell wrote your name in a small book with careful block letters and capped his pen. Mrs. Donnelly walked across the gym floor at the spring formal with the focused efficiency of a woman who had measured 6 inches with her eyes 11 times that evening. Mrs. Fitch sat in her wingback chair at 9:30 in a cardigan she'd been wearing since 1949 and did not turn the page of her magazine once. Father Hannigan capped his Parker 51 with the quiet satisfaction of a notary. Harold at the Riverside front desk slid you a room key in a brown cardigan and did not ask follow-up questions, because Harold never asked follow-up questions, and that was the whole point of Harold. Mildred Loving wrote a letter to Robert Kennedy. The letter found the right desk. The right desk eventually found the Supreme Court. Mildred came home to Caroline County, Virginia in 1967 and lived there 40 more years. The machinery has been quiet for a while now. The notebook is closed, the cardigan is folded, the porch light is off, nobody is parked outside. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench. Let the blanket settle exactly where it wants to settle, warm, weighted, and reliably patient. Sleep tight.